She hadn't seen him in 5 years, and the forest had swallowed her grief in roots and silence. Yet when the cry came thin and trembling through the trees, her body moved before thought could catch it, as if the sound had always been there, buried beneath, her breath clawing at the edges of dreams she no longer dared to have, because time had taken everything except the shape of his scent, the ghost of his warmth, the ache she carried like a second spine. And now, as dusk collapsed around her, and the wind shifted with something almost holy, she knew without reason or proof that he was near, that some fragile thread had held between them, unbroken, unheard, and now pulled taut with unbearable truth, because some bonds do not ask permission to endure, they simply wait, buried alive beneath scars and silence, until the world dares to breathe again. Each morning, she rose before the light reached the trees, moving through the undergrowth with the same quiet rhythm she had always known, stepping over fallen branches with care, pausing at the same bend in the river where the water once shimmered with reflected play. Her muscles remembered the paths, even when her mind no longer reached for them, and though she hunted, she did not chase, though she drank, she did not linger. Her days were a pattern drawn from habit, not hunger. Her nights restless with the sound she had once listened to for another, and sometimes in the stillness. Just before dawn she would stop, suddenly ears tilting as if some forgotten breath, some long-lost heartbeat had passed through the air, and she would wait, unmoving, eyes wide, not with hope, but with the absence of it, because every shadow could have been his, and none ever were, and still she walked the same routes brushed against. The same trees marked the same stones, as if keeping the world familiar, might somehow keep him within reach, and no one watching her would see pain. No limp, no wound, only a stillness, just too deep. A silence shaped like something missing, something no longer carried, but never let go. It happened in moments too fast for understanding, and yet slow enough to etch into bone. The cub's cry cut short the snap of metal, the sudden thrashing that split the air, and she ran to him. Too late. The scent of blood, and fear thick and wrong, and then voices, human voices, the kind she had learned to fear, not for herself, but for what they took, and they took him wrapped in strange smells, vanishing into the trees where her paws could not follow. She searched for days, returning to the broken earth where his scent bled into the mud. Her body circled the same patch of ground over and over, a rhythm of denial. Then days became weeks, and the world around her did not stop, but she did something in her, stilled the roar. Inside, folded in on itself, until it was only breath and pacing and listening for what never came. She no longer answered the calls of nearby tigers, no longer hunted where others passed. She avoided the rivers they once crossed together, avoided the hills where he would leap ahead and wait for her. She grew lean, not from hunger, but from absence. Her eyes dulled. Not from age, but from the weight of remembering. And even when rains returned and trees bloomed, and prey was plenty, she remained in the hollow of herself each year, layering over the last, not like healing, but like sediment pressed by silence and time. And though life around her moved forward, she moved in circles, always back to where he vanished, always alone, where once she had been too. Let me pause for just a moment and ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? Have you ever felt it? That quiet pull, when someone or something from your past still remembers you, even after all the years and silence. Maybe it was a person, maybe an animal, but that moment of recognition, that spark of something never truly lost. Have you lived it? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if this kind of story touches something in you, don't forget to follow. There's so much more to come. It wasn't a roar or a scream, but something smaller, something raw, like breath caught in fear, like the end of a dream, breaking just before waking, and when it reached her, it wasn't through air or echo, it came from inside, as if a sealed part of her, cracked without warning, and memory flooded back. Not as images, but as instinct sent. Heartbeat weight, the exact shape of warmth she had once curled around and protected with her life. She froze mid-step. Her ears flicked her breath, hitched, and for the first time in years, her body trembled. Not from cold, but from recognition. And in that trembling rose doubt, Because what if she was wrong? What if it was nothing but the wind mocking her, or the forest playing tricks on her grief? But the sound came again, softer now, fainter but real. And with it, a weight lifted from her limbs, or perhaps a burden returned because she began to walk not fast, not desperate, but with a steadiness carved from something deeper than hope. Something older than logic, because even though time had broken the world between them, even though the cub might not remember her face or her scent, or the way she once guarded his sleep, she remembered, and that remembering became motion step by step back through forgotten paths and dry riverbeds past the stones they once played on, now half buried in moss. The sun was falling fast, and she had no destination, only a direction, but something in her knew some compass of the soul turned inward. And though fear walked beside her, fear that she would arrive too late or be met with absence, she kept going, because the silence that had lived in her for years had finally been broken, and she could no longer pretend not to hear. The air was thick with the weight of dusk, the sky bruised with the last traces of fading light, and as she stepped into the clearing, every sound around her seemed to fall away. Even the wind held its breath. Her body was low taut, each paw pressed to the ground, like it remembered how to move but had forgotten why. She saw him before she let herself believe it was real. Not a trick, not a ghost. Just him, thin, wounded, still carrying the wild clumsiness of youth, but taller, older. A shape she once knew by heart, now blurred by time, and she stopped, her breath caught in her throat. Her ears turned slightly forward, catching the smallest shift in his weight. The way his head rose, uncertain eyes blinking slowly toward her. Their gaze locked, and for a moment, nothing moved. He didn't run, and she didn't call out. Instead, they stared across the soft space between them like two halves of a memory trying to meet. And then he shifted, not with fear, but with a kind of hesitant pull, as if something in him too had stirred something without name. He took a step forward and paused, his nose tilted slightly in the air, catching her scent. And that was when it happened, that flicker in his body, the tilt of his head, the blink that wasn't just instinct, it was knowing, and her legs gave slightly from beneath her. Not from weakness, but from the unbearable gentleness of the moment. She stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, like walking through a dream afraid it might shatter. She made no sound, but her eyes never left his. And when they finally met, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was quiet, so quiet it could be missed if you weren't watching the way he leaned into her chest. First, not her face, not her mouth, but the center of her, the way he had once done as a cub, pressing into her warmth, and she answered not with a roar or cry, but with stillness, her head bowed to touch his neck. Her eyes closed in a surrender, not to fear, but to something long buried and now rising again. Because in that silence, something passed between them. Not words, not logic, just the undeniable truth of belonging, and it rewrote the years in a heartbeat. Morning came slowly, golden light dripping through the trees, like memory made visible, and they had not moved much. Still curled together, his body pressed into hers, as if he had never left, as if 5 years of distance had been nothing more than a pause in breath. Her tongue moved in slow, careful strokes, cleaning his wounds, not out of duty, but out of something older than instinct, older than survival. He didn't flinch, not even once. Instead, his tail flicked once, lazily, brushing her side like a question she answered with a soft shift of her weight, allowing him to rest his head beneath her jaw, where he used to sleep when the world was new and safe. Later, when he stood, he stumbled, but she didn't move to lead. She waited watching, and when he looked back, it was not in hesitation, but in habit. And for the first time in years, she followed not to protect, not to guard, but because she wanted to, and he let her walk beside him. Their steps uneven, their bond not, and in the hours that followed, there were no roars, no calls, just small things. He nudged her flank. She batted gently at a leaf he once would have pounced on. She did not play, But she watched, and that was enough. And when he found a shallow stream and poured at it, she sat close by and dipped her muzzle in too, a gesture. Meaningless to the world, but in their language it meant I remember you, and I still choose you. They did not return to who they were. They became something new, something healed not by time alone, but by the courage to recognize what had never died. And as the forest stretched open before them, and light pooled around their shapes, one walking slightly ahead the other, just behind it, became clear this was not just survival, it was reunion, it was grace. And though no eye but the trees watched, and no voice but the wind spoke, what the wild remembered, the wild returned. Because love, when true, does not vanish. It waits until it is safe to be seen again. Some bonds do not ask to be remembered. They simply endure, waiting beneath silence, beneath scars, beneath the long, slow weight of time. And when they return, they do not roar. They breathe, they look, they touch. And in that stillness, everything changes. Not because the past is undone, but because it is finally seen. And in the quiet of that reunion, something broken mends. Not all at once, not loudly, but surely like light, returning to a room, thought long abandoned. Because true connection never truly fades. It waits until the moment the heart is ready to open again and say without words, I never stopped carrying you.